Hi, I'm Ingo from Roast Rebels, and in this video we will do a roast together on the Behmor 2020 SR coffee roaster. So this video is really about doing a roast on the machine, seeing how the panel is working, what you have to look at when doing a roast on the Behmor. If you want to know more about the roaster, about its features, functionalities, what I like about the roaster, what I don't like too much about the roaster, my recommendations, then have a look at the other video that I did on this channel. And in this video, it's not about the features or theoretical aspects. We will really go into roasting with the machine. First thing that we do when we want to roast is, of course, plug in the roaster. And here you can see there is a sign which says, do not use with extension cords, which I think is not really realistic because the cord here is quite short. So most of us will need an extension cord, but just take care to use a good quality extension cord and one that is not too long, so that's just long enough that you need to plug in your roaster. What's really important about the roaster is that you handle the drum with care. There is also a picture description in the manual. Have a look at it and really follow it as Joe says, because he has some experiences since about 13 years. If you don't treat the drum correctly, then you have a risk that it's being in misshape, that it's not closing perfectly anymore, that it's blocking and that it's damaging the roaster and even maybe leading to a fire in the roaster. So really take care of the drum, and I show you how to do it. You take your drum out here, take it in both hands, use your thumbs to open it here, and then you can fill in your beans. After that, you close it again gently so that it's really closed, and like this you can start roasting. So what we will do now is fill in 200 grams of a strictly high-grown, really beautiful Guatemalan coffee. It's a organic grown and fair-traded coffee, and a really beautiful one. And this is a typical coffee for the P1 profile that is in the roaster for a You take your beans, put it in the roast drum, close it gently, and then put the drum in your roaster. You can see here is the part that is going to the motor. It's actually quite easy to figure out which part is on which side. Once it's in your roaster, make sure it's really perfectly inside. Close it, and now you're ready to go. What I usually do is I preheat the roaster, and there is also a description on how to preheat the roaster in the manual. So I preheat it and then put the drum in it, and therefore you maybe need to be a bit used to how to put the drum in the roaster, and then it's quite easy, but just take care not to burn your hands, of course. When you roast for the first time, then you have to set the voltage of your network that you're in. And the way you do it, for example, our network is 230 volt. So the roaster is now unplugged. I press button B. And while pressing button B, I plug it. And then you see here 230, which means I'm in the 230 volt network. And this is something that you have to do just one time to set the roaster. So when pressing A, it's 220, B is 230, C is 240. And you find this also in the manual, something that you have to do just once. Now I will show you two ways of roasting with the Behmor. One is the automatic easy mode, and one is the manual mode where you take control yourself. So for the automatic mode, we took 200 grams of a Guatemalan strictly hard bean coffee. So we choose 200. We could also choose 100 or 400, but we choose the 200 because we have 200 grams of beans. You also see on one hand here, it's written how many grams you have chosen. And also you see how the time of the roast is changing, whether you're roasting 200 gram, 400 gram, or 100 gram. Then you choose your program, 1 to 5, and you see a description of these programs in the user manual. I will take now P1, which is the roast profile for strictly hard bean coffees. And when I did that, I just press start. Now the roaster is working. I open it now so that you can see what's happening inside. You see I have this roast drum here, and behind it are then the heating elements, the infrared heating elements that you don't see at the moment, but they will start to glow very quickly. The buttons you can press is the light. So you have a nice light in the roaster and you can easily see the beans. I close it now again to start the roast. And other buttons that you can press when you do a automatic roast is button A, which is showing you the exhaust temperature, which is now around 39 degrees Celsius. Or button B, which is showing you the inside temperature of the roast chamber, which is now at 82 Celsius. And that's more or less it. At the moment you don't press any other button, but you will do when the roaster is hitting first crack. Then you will press button C, which is setting back the timer. So Behmor is recommending you some timings for the development phase of the first crack until the end of the roast. And at the end is something that you have to decide for yourself. But maybe just it helps you to get an orientation when hitting first crack, you press C, and then you have a separate measurement for the development phase. Something that you can do is with these time increase buttons, add 15 seconds or reduce 15 seconds of the roast. And what's happening here when the counter is hitting 0, then the roaster is stopping and it's going into cooling mode. If you want to cool earlier, then you just press manually on this cool button and the roaster goes into cooling mode. And something you have to take into consideration at about 75% of the roast time, the roaster is beeping, it's giving you a sign, and then you have to go to the roaster, press one of the P buttons. If you don't do that, then the roaster is shutting down, showing error 7. This is just a safety feature because you have to stay at your roaster when roasting. Now, if you go into the manual mode, then you start same as with an automatic mode, but then you just press on one of these P buttons. So for example, I press now P1, and you see in manual mode, the P is blinking. So when one of these P buttons, P1, P2, P3, P4 or P5 are blinking, then you're in manual mode. When they're stable, then you're in automatic mode. So that's the way to recognize in which mode you are. And what you can change now in manual mode is the amount of heat that is going in the roaster. It's quite easily to figure out. P1, which has just a black circle and no red portion in it, is 0% heat. P2, with a quarter or 25% of red in the circle, is 25% of heat added to the roaster. P3, 50%, you see half of it is red. P4, 3/4 of it are red, and then P5 are full power, 100% heat. And especially for a strictly hard bean like this, I would always recommend to go with full heat. You don't risk any scorching or tipping with the Behmor roast. I mean, there is some risk, but it's really low in this roaster. I would really recommend, especially when you do filter coffees, light roasts, strictly hard bean, dense roasts to go on 100% until first crack, and then reduce it to, for example, 50%. There is also a video, you can find it on our channel, where I talked about bean density and the according roast profile that you can check then also. So still here, same, you can figure out the exhaust temperature, you can figure out the inside temperature of the roast chamber, and what you can also do is changing the drum speed with the button D. So you have two speeds, you have a bit a lower speed, you have a bit a higher speed. Also in another video where I talked about convection, conduction, heat transfer, you can find more information on when I recommend to have more conductive or more convective heat transfer. What I recommend you to make it easy is if you do a classical espresso roast, a darker Italian coffee, then go for a slower drum speed. When you want to have more clarity in the coffee, more sweetness, a bit more acidity, then go for the higher drum speed, which for example here with this Guatemalan coffee. So this is my recommendation, rule of thumb. And then if you want to go back from the manual mode to automatic mode, you can press the button 400 and it switches now back to P1 to your automatic roast. You hear now first crack. Behmor is hitting first crack. We're at about 180 degrees exhaust temperature, 138 temperature of the roast chamber. And you hear the first crack. And I changed now to the programmatic mode. I pressed the C button, which is this counting back. So the Behmor recommendation to roast for another 2 minutes. If you would be in manual mode, then you would just take your heat now back with the start of the first crack. I would recommend you to do these changes quite early, so when first crack starts, lower the temperature, because this kind of roasters are a bit slower in heat changes. So when it reaches first crack, lower the temperature so that you get control during development phase and can make a really nice coffee. And I'm ending the roast and pressing cool. You see the cooling cycle is saying to be about 12 minutes, which is quite long. I really recommend to wait for about 2 minutes and then open the roaster so that the cooling cycle is then faster. And that's it. So easy it is to roast coffee with the Behmor coffee roaster. One thing I was surprised when I saw it the first time, but it has to be like this. You see here, this rubber part is quite in waves. And I thought first that is something wrong with the roaster, but it is not. You see here it is fixed at these points. And since it's expanding due to the heat, it just gets a bit larger and is taking waves. So don't be surprised if you see this. It's just normal for the roaster. I hope this video was helpful for you. If you want to know more about the machine, then as I said, go to the other video where I talk about the features. And if you want to know more about roasters or roasting in general, then I look forward to hearing from you. You find my contact on roastrebels.com.